Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Six for Six. I'm your host Trevor, and we got a really good, interesting lineup for you today. On today's program of Six for Six. Today we are covering the Women's World Cup. It starts July 20th. Yes, Australia and New Zealand are ahead of us, so yes, they are already in the day of the World Cup. But here on the other half of the world, we are still on July 19th. So we're working our way closer to that. A lot of those matches, like I mentioned previously, on 6 for 6 or during the twilight hours. So we're putting all of our times out in advance. Try to get to watch them, but I feel like the only time for me to catch some of these games are the ones at 10 p.m. Eastern time, where I get to catch it right before I go to sleep. But it's literally like as soon as that match goes on, it goes into midnight. So it's not like the best scenario for us to watch in America. So hopefully a lot of the U.S. matches are at the 10 p.m. slot, so I can at least get a snippet of it. Most likely I'll be watching the replays. So building this script for 6 for 6, ladies and gentlemen, it was tricky. I'd say it's not an easy task when you're building time slots to watch when a lot of times the games are at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. It's like if you're having a rough night of sleep or you can't sleep, you got something to watch. So without further ado, let's remind you our season record. We're 19, 15, and 1. So you get 19, 15, and 1. So can we do better and get another perfect 6 for 6? We've done it, previously on 6 for 6 in season 2, but we still haven't accomplished that in season 3 as of yet. So we're going to keep our spirits high. We're going to run through tonight's program, make it quick, easy, and simple, get you guys on out. Hopefully, the StreamYard and YouTube will allow me to post it after the fact to get the downloads and post it, which is always beneficial. But I have a feeling that we won't be able to post it until maybe the 21st. We'll see how it goes and how long it takes for it to render. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get the show on the road. So in the 6th slot for today, ladies and gentlemen, we got to go to like the home opener. New Zealand versus Norway Women's World Cup at 3 a.m. We got to look at the team's history. You can catch it tomorrow on Fox at 3 a.m. Eastern time. New Zealand versus Norway. Match is interesting for the most part. If you look at the team's history back, the first match that they ever met was in 2008, and Norway won 1-0. And then next time they meet, literally 11 years later, on April 9th, 2019, New Zealand beat Norway. So I feel like, okay, 2019, the team should relatively, a couple old people on both squads. But if you look at 2022, July 25th, 2022, Norway, New Zealand went at it again, and Norway ended up winning 2-0. So if you're looking at 2022 as an example, a lot of that team should relatively be the same. So if we're using that type of eye test in this scenario, you get a feel for it. But it's like you got to look at the teams with what they played against. Norway's playing a lot against a lot of the European squads, and it's just really hard to see that they go up against like certain teams. Like you have no team that you can compare that these squads have faced, that there's a commonality saying this is how many points that each individual scored. So it's very difficult to unfold out who's going to end up winning it. But if I'm using the numbers from 2022, I'm going to have to go with Norway winning this one. Yes, I wish the host would end up coming out and winning it, but I think Norway is just going to be a better squad in this women's matchup, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to give the dub to Norway in this one. So you can catch this game, New Zealand versus Norway Women's World Cup, July 20th, 3 a.m. on Fox. Next up in the 5th slot, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Philippines versus Switzerland Women's World Cup. And you can catch this July 21st, 1 a.m. on FS1. Ladies and gentlemen, this is, I would say, a bracket that we can look at. These two teams do not have a history, so I can't look back in time to figure out, who's better and all that stuff. But we do have a commonality between these two teams. They both have faced Iceland of this year, so we can use that as a way to help us navigate, the eye test. So when the Philippines played Iceland, Iceland destroyed the Philippines 5-0. But if we look at, when Switzerland played Iceland, it was 2-1. So if we're looking at the defense between Switzerland and the Philippines can get overwhelmed easily compared to if we're looking to Iceland. Yes, you have Scotland, Wales, and the Chiles, but those are more reasonable opponents for the Philippines to face and keep those matchups close. Where Switzerland will go up against Germany, Italy, England, France, Spain, teams that will actually put up points and take, a run for their money in a lot of this cup for the women's tournament. So, using, like I said, the analysis and all that stuff, even China's in the World Cup for the women's of this year. So, it's like you got teams that Switzerland is playing against in the World Cup. And that means, in my eyes, that Switzerland is more battle tested and will have more experience in this matchup. Yes, the Philippines can, put points up, but I feel like they're going to have a hard time on their attack and trying to move the ball down the field. I think Switzerland is going to have a better defense and make it difficult for the Philippines to score. And that's where Switzerland's going to counter on, the counterattacks and really pushing it up and putting a lot of pressure on the Philippines defense. But without further ado, I'm going to give the dub to Switzerland in this one over the Philippines. So you can catch the Philippines versus Switzerland Women's World Cup July 21st, 1 a.m. Eastern on FS1. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, in the fourth slot, we have Nigeria versus Canada. Good matchup between these two squads. You got a little bit of a history in there. I'm going to use more of the 2022 numbers of what we got. If we got April of 2022, Canada won 2-0 over Nigeria, but literally 3 days later in a friendly, they tied it 2-2. So, like I said, Nigeria can come out and play against Canada. Based off of that 2022 number, it's very close to see what we got, but Canada has been on a couple of losing streaks. They lost to France, they lost to Japan, and they lost to the United States, but they beat Brazil and lost to Brazil. So the Canadian women's squad has some ups and downs, taking some beats here and there. But the Nigerian women are on a win streak. They took care of New Zealand 3-0, took Haiti 2-1, defeat Costa Rica 1-0, lost to Mexico 1-0. They lost to Japan 2-0. So we're using the commonality of the eye test. The Japan one was in 2022, but for Canada, they lost in 2023, but going into February, squad members. But I think Nigeria could probably pull up the upset here. I want to give them the hope and the, dreams to be able to upset Canada. And I think they have what it takes. And we'll have to see at 10 p.m. East, 10:30 p.m. Eastern time on Fox, Nigeria versus Canada. I'm going to give Nigeria the edge on this one. And then let's see if they can take care of business. I know Canada is a formidable foe, but I think the Nigerian women have what it takes to take care of business and walk out with the dub. Next up in the third slot, ladies and gentlemen, we have Sweden versus South Africa, Women's World Cup, July 3rd, no, 23rd, I should say, at 1 a.m. Eastern on FS1. Ooh, ladies and gentlemen, looking at the matchup between these two squads, the head-to-head matchups, South Africa just does not stand a chance. Looking at the history, yes, of 2019, it was 0-0. Well, and if you look at 2018, 3-0 Sweden, 2016, 1-0 Sweden, and then in 2012, 4-1 Sweden. So if you're looking at the matchup in this, like, South Africa has struggled, I would say. We're just going to start to look at slowly more on the 2023 numbers, because I know I mentioned the 2022 and just breaking it down. But as we get closer, closer to that date, we got to get a feel for it. But we have South Africa beating Costa Rica, but losing to Serbia. And as you can see, it's just like you don't know what you're going to get for the South African team. I'm not confident that they're going to be able to run the table, run the gauntlet, and cause pandemonium. But Sweden goes up against Norway, which Norway is a formidable foe, being in the European circuit, and just be able to take care of business and winning it where it's crucial. They tied Germany. Germany women take care of business as well. Not as like, the men's Germany team, but, still up there, still can produce points, still a solid brick wall at times. And it's just going from there. But I'm feeling the edge that Sweden will walk away with this dub. I think the women of Sweden will be able to do it. I feel like they're more a solid team, better all the way around, and probably won't give up as many goals as we expect. But as we know in the glorious game of football, it can go any way. As soon as that first goal is scored, panic sets in, team starts to panic, and the game could unravel itself. It could be 3-0 real quick, and Sweden would be down and they lose this game. Or Sweden gets away and puts up 2 scores relatively quickly, and South Africa has to find a way to respond to those 2 quick goals. So you can catch Sweden, South Africa, Women's World Cup, July 23rd, 1 a.m. Eastern on FS1, and have Sweden winning it. Next up, we're getting down towards the meat and potatoes of this, ladies and gentlemen. We have the Netherlands versus Portugal, Women's World Cup, July 23rd, 3:30 a.m. Eastern time on FS1, ladies and gentlemen. Boy, the Netherlands, they have reached the Women's World Cup semis. They have some good teams in the past. They've reached finals, and they lost to the United States. So I know the Netherlands have a good squad. I'm giving them an edge over Portugal in this scenario just based on, recency bias and what they've done in the past. But you have the Netherlands destroying Belgium 5-0, destroying Poland 4-1, losing to Germany 1-0, but destroying Austria, 4-0. But when they played Austria earlier in this year, they lost 2-1. But if you look at Portugal, they tied England, they tied Wales, they lose to Japan, they beat Cameroon, and they destroyed New Zealand. But if they're tying England and all that stuff, there's one thing, but they tied Wales. And that's where I'm going to give them the knock right there, because they tied Wales in this scenario. Yes, I can knock Netherlands for losing to Austria, but they destroyed Austria following up that year. So using that logic, the Netherlands redeemed themselves, and now they're on the right track to build that momentum for the World Cup. And they already got 2 dubs right before this World Cup kind of got underway. Like their last dub was in July 2nd over Belgium. Solid lineup, solid performance. And they probably got their starters, got the lineup that they want going into their first match. But I don't think the Portuguese women will be able to defeat the Netherlands women. So I'm going to have the Netherlands win it. So you got Netherlands versus Portugal, Women's World Cup, July 23rd at 3:30 a.m. Eastern time on FS1. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the game of the week of the first part of the group stages in the Women's World Cup, we have Italy versus Argentina. The Argentinian women versus the Italian women. Very good matchup for these 2 squads. The Argentinian women, yes, the South America countries do have some good ball clubs, but in Europe has good ball clubs as well. So it's like you got a mixed bag in there. What you can foresee, I would say, for the most part. But Italy beat New Zealand 1-0, but tied Morocco, beat Colombia 2-1, beat South Korea 2-1, and lost to England 2-1. So as you can see, Italy will score a point. Now, the thing with Argentina, they've been running up the score. They won 4-0 on Peru, 3-0 on Venezuela, 1-1 with Venezuela, but it looks like they lost in shootouts based on how the screenshot has it, because they have an L. But they beat New Zealand 1-0 and also beat New Zealand 2-0. So if you're looking at the New Zealand matchup, it's going to be relatively close. I could see a tie, but I believe in the Argentinian women. Probably have some good strikers on their team. Probably able to move the ball through, but I feel like Italy has a strong defense because they won't give up a lot of points looking at the teams that they've played against. So it's going to be close, but I'm feeling it's going to be like a 2-1 score. The Argentinian women is going to probably get a late goal in this game, and that's how it's going to basically seal this game's fate. But I have the Argentinian women winning it. You can catch Italy, Argentina, Women's World Cup on July 24th at 2 a.m. Eastern time on FS1. Without further ado, let's do a quick recap and we'll get you on out so you can enjoy all these matchups coming up this week, so you can be well rested, so you can enjoy the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. So let's do a quick recap. So in the 6th slot, we have New Zealand versus Norway, Women's World Cup, July 20th, 3 a.m. Eastern time on Fox, and I have Norway winning it. In the fifth slot, ladies and gentlemen, if StreamYard will allow me to do it. So we have the Philippines versus Switzerland Women's World Cup. You can catch it July 21st, 1 a.m. Eastern Time on FS1, and I have Switzerland winning it. Next up in the fourth slot, we have Nigeria versus Canada Women's World Cup, July 20th at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox, and I have Nigeria winning it. Next up in the third slot, we have Sweden versus South Africa Women's World Cup, July 23rd, 1 a.m. Eastern on FS1, and I have Sweden winning it. Next up in the two slot, we have the Netherlands versus Portugal Women's World Cup. This game's on July 23rd at 3:30 a.m. Eastern Time on FS1, and I have the Netherlands winning it. And last but not least, the game of the week, ladies and gentlemen, we have Italy versus Argentina Women's World Cup. You can catch this game July 24th at 2 a.m. Eastern Time on FS1, and I have Argentina winning it. Let me just remind you of our record this season. We are 19-15-1. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the start of the Women's World Cup, and we'll catch you here next week on 6 for 6 as we cover more of the Women's World Cup. So long for now. Bye-bye.